All right, we have some powerhouses up here, and I'm super excited to jump right into this panel. Again, my name is Meloni Boatswain. I am the Southeast Regional Director of Blacks in Technology, and I'm also the Atlanta Chapter President for Blacks in Technology as well. And I'm gonna, open the floor and give these ladies a chance to introduce themselves. But before we kind of jump into that, I wanted to make sure that everybody in here is familiar with the topic that we're gonna be discussing. So I'm not gonna ask how many people know about ERGs. I'm gonna ask how many people don't know what an ERG is or have never been a part of an ERG or seen it in a corporation. How many people don't know what an ERG is? Okay, so yeah, there's a couple of them. We were talking about that back in the green room. I did want to open up with kind of explaining what ERGs are, employee resource groups. They're not new, even though they've been talked about a lot in recent years, especially since the death of George Floyd. But they were actually started during the civil rights era at Xerox. And they were a way for Black employees at Xerox to feel like an inclusive environment. And it was spearheaded by the CEO at that time. So this is something that's been around for a while. And I wanted to start with JoAnn. You can introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Fadjanie and Shana.
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is JoAnn Means. I am a Senior Diversity Talent Sourcer at TD Bank. I'm also the BEN co-lead for Black Employee Network for Pennsylvania and New Jersey.
Hi, everybody. My name is Fadjanie Cadet. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Forrester. I've been there for a year and a half and have spent my entire career in the HR or talent space.
And I'm Shana. I'm the Senior Manager of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Communities at Hubspot. So my role is externally facing, but I have the joy and privilege of partnering a lot with our internal employee resource groups.
All right, thank you so much, ladies. So let's jump into the questions. So how can ERGs effectively influence company-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, particularly within the tech industry?
Well, I think that we all know that ERGs are the catalyst for driving diversity, equity, and inclusion across organizations. And so I think some ways that ERGs can really be supported are making sure we have diverse perspectives, right? Making sure we hear from everyone across the table. Also making sure that we take a look at current programming to see what's working, what's not working, and make change. And then lastly, taking a look at diversity recruitment strategies. I think if we're able to do all of that collectively, then we're able to really make our underrepresented employees feel welcomed, and thus leading to increased engagement and retention in organizations.
Awesome. Fadjanie?
Yeah, to add to that, I think that we know that there's a representation, I won't say opportunity, but a problem in tech. And so ERGs are really helpful in retaining diverse talent. So how do we keep folks in the industry? Creating a sense of belonging in communities internally is critical to that. The other thing is, I think the latter half of that question was particularly in tech. We are hearing a lot more about the need and criticality of inclusive design, right? How do we design technology that is inclusive? And having ERGs really creates this sort of in-house focus groups that organizations could hear and learn from to make sure that when they're designing new technology or adapting technology, that it is applicable and beneficial for all communities.
I also think that employee resource groups allow the opportunity for visibility and being able to see people in the roles that you're hoping for. A lot of the communities that I run, they are for customers or fans of HubSpot, and so we are able to bring in employees internally, mainly from ERGs, who are able to come in and become thought leaders in these spaces. They're becoming the faces and the representation for folks to ask questions. If they're planning on interviewing at HubSpot, they are able to teach people about the professions and things that they're working on and the projects that they're working on. We're able to share what it actually looks like to work at this company and being able to have kind of unfiltered conversations about that experience and tie it all back into the hope that we are, again, as you were saying, building more of a sense of belonging, driving that engagement and retention within the company. And so all of that ties back into the roles that ERGs can play to help companies.
Awesome. So, JoAnn, in our initial conversations, I know that you're at TD now, but you do have experience with DE&I office positions and ERGs at other companies. So, I wanted to ask you, how do you measure the effectiveness of an ERG within a corporation?
So the way we measure effectiveness is really seeing participant, how many participants came, evaluating with surveys, getting feedback also to see what worked, what didn't work, what could be better. And then also at TD, we have a dedicated team that actually looks at all of that. But those are just some of the ways to really measure and make sure that we're having impact for our DEI goals and the company's goals as well.
And Fadjanie, just a follow-up question on that. What role do you believe that executive leadership should play in supporting and amplifying the DE&I efforts within ERGs?
Executive leadership engagement is super important. I think the role that they play primarily is helping ERG members and the community understand where there's alignment to organizational goals. So keeping them in the loop on what business priorities are so that they can identify where those opportunities are for deepest impact. I think it's also important for leaders to create space for ERG members to share their progress and what they're doing. And then lastly, I would say mentorship, right? So executive leaders should also be prioritizing mentoring the leaders and the members in ERGs to support that retention that we talked about before, to increase representation in organizations. But I think the alignment, strategic alignment, mentorship, and then visibility.
Well, I definitely love your perspective, especially because I know that you are just now starting up the ERG at Forrester, correct? And when you and I talked, and going back to JoAnn saying that the ERGs are a catalyst, right? They're not the only way forward to DE&I. That should come after as a result of the initiatives from the company, right? So explain to me some of the things that you're looking at in creating the ERGs at Forrester.
Yeah, so I've been at Forrester for a year and a half, and I'm their first head of DE&I. And so it was a very intentional decision of mine to not launch ERGs at the start of my time, because I wanted to make sure that we were building shared understanding and awareness of what DE&I were, right? Like, what are the words behind the acronym? What's the impact? Why is it important? And then what can ERGs do to further propel the success or evolution of DEI in our organization? And so laying that foundation was critically important. And I think it's because there's a lot of myths about what ERGs are, right? I've heard that they are social groups, that they are not aligned to the business, that they're exclusive groups, right? That are for folks from underrepresented communities and no one else. And those are all myths, right? And that can shape folks' understanding of what ERGs are and their appetite for bringing it into their organization. And so creating that shared understanding, building that level of awareness was critically important. And now that we've done that over the last year, we are getting ready to get started. And so the first step that we're taking is sending out a survey to our organization and asking them, based on what you've learned and your now shared understanding of ERGs, what are the types of communities that are really important to you all? And then we'll take that data to then inform our decisions.
And Shana, could you add to that? Because I know that you do a lot of work with the ERGs and the internal partnerships within the company. Can you expound on how you have kind of advanced the ERGs at your company using those partnerships?
Yeah, so our DI&B team at Hubspot is phenomenal. Hubspot has a unique case because we actually have dedicated program managers who run the communities as a full-time role. And so they are planning all of the programming, they're doing the scheduling, they are sharing amazing documents that teams can use internally to discuss DI&B topics and how to make sure that those conversations continue. And with the communities that I run, we're able to not only highlight and celebrate the events that happen throughout the year, but we're able to also bring in new voices to the conversation. So with some of our partnerships, we are able to launch different programs that can benefit both employees and customers of HubSpot. As well, we're able to get more answers from surveys from folks and being able to see, like, hey, what does this internal perspective look like compared to an external perspective? What are the ways that we can get folks to come in and speak on these topics, we have partnerships with a lot of different communities. We've worked with Boston While Black, Blacks in Tech, Blavity. So all of these groups are able to not only come and join us internally, but they're able to do so externally as well. And that's benefiting everybody in HubSpot's ecosystem. So it's really awesome to be able to see how those relationships can grow, and it allows us to work better together. So each of those moments to bring people in, but also share those resources is incredibly important for HubSpot as a whole.
The fact that HubSpot has dedicated full-time resources that are program managers for these ERGs is really huge. There are a lot of misconceptions about what ERGs are. And in my experience with Blacks in Technology and reaching out to ERGs at some of these larger corporations to kind of, do some collaboration with them, I realized that a lot of them don't have a line item in their budget to do anything. It really is just kind of a social club, a networking club within their organizations. And I really wanted each of you to kind of expound on what are some of the resources that you need to have an effective ERG, because it can't just, to your point, Fadjanie, as far as it just being a club or, something that's exclusive, how do you really affect change if you don't have the budget or the support?
I think you really need to have dedicated funding for ERGs. Either you're going to be about it or you're not. And ERGs need that support. A lot of people do this work on the side of their desk, volunteering, so we need the resources, right? So I think dedicated funding is one. I think also executive sponsorship. So again, what we were saying about making sure we have that executive buy-in, because everything with an organization starts at the top. So if we don't have that executive buy-in, it's not going to work. And then lastly, making sure we also have training and development dollars as well, right? So that we can really empower our ERG members as well.
I mean, I would just say we're getting ready to launch ERGs at Forrester, and a budget for the ERGs is just and period, right? Like,
Right.
it has to happen, or
Right.
else it's just a club. We could just do a happy hour at the pizza joint
Right.
across the street and call it people who work at Forrester hanging out, right?
Right.
And so if it's going to be an employee resource group, it needs to be the word is in there, resource to the groups and to the people, and resources include financial support. I think the other thing is definitely echoing the executive sponsorship and visibility piece. And then, HubSpot has it. A lot of other sort of large corporations have the dedicated resources. The other thing I would say is internal support, right, is something that they need. Whether it's a dedicated program manager or ERG community manager, whether it's someone whose role on the DEI team internally who focuses on supporting those communities, whether it's resources externally, right? You partner with an organization who supports ERG members via a tool or platform. They need resources, right? So that they can identify where to be focused and then provide the optimal value. Because I think that that's one of the major challenges that I've seen in organizations who've had ERGs for some time, is folks are like, when I talk to the leaders, what is your biggest challenge? They say they don't know what their vision is or what they should be focused on. And so having that internal support and that executive support is critical.
So, Shana, do you want to talk about how you've been able to navigate some of the challenges within your organization or other organizations that you've been with as it relates to DE&I and ERGs?
Yeah, I think the consistent issue that we have is whether or not you have buy-in from leadership. That's always the biggest challenge that a lot of folks have. I think, thankfully, actually making it to HubSpot has been the easiest transition, but we still have conversations around the things that we should be investing in and where we should be putting our dollars and how we should be making impact. Thankfully, each of our programs work towards specific goals and they ladder up to our business decisions, so it's a very easy argument to make. But when it comes to how we're supporting, who we're supporting, where we're bringing people externally in, and vice versa, what does that actually look like? And especially in opportunities where we can provide growth opportunities, professional development opportunities for employees. Anybody who comes into the external communities that I host, they automatically become a thought leader. They are able to speak at events. We host networking events. We host webinars, panels. They are able to become thought leaders in that way. They're able to learn the skills of being a moderator or being a panelist and being able to speak on the work that they're doing, being able to actually push forward an initiative that they're like, that could be a little expensive. How much is that actually going to help the business? How much is that going to actually make money? And with community building, businesses want instant gratification. But that's not how communities work. Right. Communities take long-term development and long-term investment, and it's going to pay off. I was like, the retention is going to be there, the engagement is going to be there, the retention that we spoke on, the increase in sense of belonging, all of those things are going to be represented if you invest. But you can't make it an instant turnaround. Right. Like, this isn't a Pop-Tart. You can't just pop it in and take
right.
it out, okay? You have to actually take the time to make something great and be able to build it and develop relationships, because there is no reason that folks are going to come in and just be like, oh, well, you're Hubspot, you're a popular company, I should totally just follow everything that you say. You have to prove that. And it's the same thing with your friendships or the groups that you're working with. You have to develop those relationships. And I think that's where I get the largest pushback, is on the timing that it takes to build communities. But if they go and take that investment and actually stick with it, they can see how those numbers are going to grow, how the satisfaction rate's going to grow, how the retention rate is going to grow, and that's the part that is a win for companies who actually invest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been tons of studies done that, diversity really helps your bottom line, right? So there's just, there's no doubt about that. The data doesn't lie, right? So JoAnn, I wanted you to talk about you have a unique experience where you're working at a company now who has, their DEI efforts are working, ERG is working, but you've also had an experience that was not as successful. So I just wanted to hear you talk about just maybe your challenges that you've had and really how your experience at TD has kind of changed your outlook.
Yes, so years ago, I worked as a diversity, equity, inclusion director for an organization, and I was really excited to get hired and work. This was right at the height of George Floyd, and during the interview, we talked about sponsorship, we talked about, of course, executive sponsorship, talked about wonderful things, right? Once I got that position, I quickly saw that that was not their interest. They literally just wanted me to be the face. They didn't want me to talk about any unconscious bias, white privilege, none of that. They were just like, oh, JoAnn, you know what? We don't want to upset people. And I was like, okay, so why am I here? And I have to tell you, that is the shortest job I've ever had. I was there 8 months. I was like, I'm gone. Because either we're going to be about it or we're not. We have to stand on business when it comes to DEI, at least for me. And I can honestly say that I have been fortunate at TD to be able to create many initiatives that they have just welcomed. Like, they can't get enough of the things that I'm saying that we need to do, right? I think I was telling you earlier, I actually did an HBCU professional clothing drive and was able to partner with all of my employee resource groups. So the LGBTQ community, women at TD, Black Employee Network, we all came together collectively. We gave gift cards. I mean, we gave over 400 pieces of clothing to HBCU students that were lacking professional clothing. So we did this at Dell State, Lincoln, and Cheney. And so when ERGs are able to come together, these are the types of impacts we can have, right? So for me, I have to work for a company that is, like I said, standing on business about making sure that we are creating change, that we are creating new initiatives, and honestly seeing what's wrong and seeing what's working and what's not working. So I love TD, and I never am going back to that company again. So.
Awesome. Well, I just had one final question, and I kind of wanted this to just, tell me what your thoughts are about the future trends. What do you anticipate being the future trend of the role of ERGs in driving inclusive tech leadership and advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I personally think we're going to continue to see ERGs advance. I think we're really going to partner with community organizations as well as industry organizations as well. I know for me, I've been able to partner with organizations right here in Philadelphia, Achievability. They're an upskilling program that they have with taking underrepresented and underserved participants and have them in a Salesforce program. So here we are, they've got this upskilling program that is for underrepresented people, right? So when we talk about diversity, we can't just say, oh, there's diversity in tech. I'm talking about underrepresented people that want to be in tech, because there's a difference, right? So being able to partner with them and then telling TD about these organizations, right? And another wonderful organization is Perscolas, which is another upskilling program, boot camp, that focuses on IT programs like cybersecurity and other IT programs. But I was able to bring that to TD. So I think that's, to me, what's going to happen is more ERGs are going to be working with community groups and industry leaders to really make that impact and change with organizations.
I think for me, the biggest trend I'm seeing and I think is critical is ERGs are going to be more business oriented. And so what I mean by that is well-positioned, well-articulated in how they're driving value to the organization, really embedding D, E, and I into the facets of the organization. I think when we talk about the experience that JoAnn had at that organization for 8 months, the pushback and the resistance, I think a lot of that's happening and what's been pushing folks out of this work or away from this work, which is a whole other conversation, is the transition or inability to be metric driven, right? So being able to, I always say, moving from a passion influence to a passion to an influence informed strategy. So really being able to understand what are the metrics, what are the organizational goals, and then how can diversity, equity, and inclusion be enablement tools to drive the business. And so I think that is a critical shift we're going to see. We're going to see more intersectional groups because people identify in so many different ways. And so I think one day we'll see, instead of just Black in tech, you might see, Black in bi and Black, right? Or Native American women, right? So I think we'll see more intersectional groups, and I also think more global groups as well, right? There are organizations like your Microsofts, your Amazons, your Googles of the world that are really large, but then you also have mid to small size organizations that don't have as much depth in different parts of the world, and we can end up being exclusive when we have groups only in certain parts of the world. So I think more globalization and taking a global mindset to ERGs is something else that we'll see.
Awesome.
I love these answers. I also think there's going to be a higher demand for accountability from businesses who have ERGs and what they do with the ERGs. I think there are some companies who still operate like it's 2020 and they came in hot with events and parties and trying to make it a really positive, really upbeat experience, and now employees are changing the tides to say, well, what are you doing to invest in me?
Right.
What programs are we actually building? How can I actually grow in my professional development, and how can you make this happen through the ERGs? And folks can't just continue to have these nice, upbeat, celebrity-filled events moving forward. It's just not realistic, and it's not staying with the times of what we're doing. And I also agree, especially on the external partnerships, people are going to want to get out there. People are going to want to partner more. I think schools, especially like HBCUs or HSIs, like they're going to be incredibly important in the growth and development. And as you had been saying earlier, where it's like it's not just a social party anymore, I think there are going to be really important steps needed to take where it doesn't just become identity-based ERGs. I think folks are going to have to focus on folks with varying levels of disabilities. You're going to focus on veterans. You're going to focus on first generation. So there's going to be, I think, expansiveness in that, but I also think there is going to be a bit of a battle that comes over the next few years because DEI is already under attack currently, and we have to be prepared for what that looks like and continue to show why ERGs exist and the positive results of that.
All right, well, let's give them a hand. Thank you so much for being here and sharing with us. I did want to open it up to some questions. I think that we have a couple more minutes. We're good? Okay, we have plenty of time. All right, perfect. All right, the first hand right here, I'm gonna just tell on her right here. So, this is my childhood best friend. So She's got the first question. I didn't prompt her, though.
First, wonderful panel. This was such an important topic, and I love that at the end you hit on that these ERGs are under attack, because that's all I was thinking throughout this whole conversation. So I really wanted to pose to you, with the Harvard case, for those who are not familiar, this affirmative action case. So I actually work for an accounting firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and many of our clients are white and male and don't care about these ERGs. And it's putting corporations in a position where if the clients are not in support of ERGs, now it's having them rethink their whole D&I strategy. So I just wanted to pose the question with the three of you, what are the allies, or as many of you have been saying, like getting the buy-in of executive leadership, like what conversations are being had now specifically as it relates to kind of this attack that we're under that you hinted at the end?
Well, I can tell you. There you go. Well, I can tell you for TD, because I'm specifically a diversity recruitment sourcer, right? So that's my job. We've had conversation with our CEO who said, you know what, we're doubling down on this. Yes, we hear the news and everything, but TD, we're going to continue to drive this HBCU engagement. We're going to continue to keep making sure that we have people, coming to TD that are diverse. So for them, they said, you know what, we're not going to change what we're doing. It's always going to be top of mind. So that's the only thing I can say about TD. I don't know about some of the other ones, but for TD, we're not changing anything. So
the conversation, this is where we go back to that data-driven D&I as an enablement tool, because I think that a lot of the pushback that we're hearing about is from misinformation. Folks don't know what they're talking about, to be honest, right? They don't know what DE&I is. They can't break down what the different letters represent, and they're just objecting for the sake of objecting. So I think building awareness and educating folks, including your stakeholders outside, like your clients, on what this work really is, what we're doing, and then what is the value, right? And I think there's been arguably this thing that happened in 2020, from 2020 to 2023, everyone came in hot, as you said, using that language, right? Post the murder of George Floyd, we were passion informed. We were trying to do the thing because it was the right thing to do. We felt bad, and we were leading with events and all the soft stuff. And I think in that process, where some organizations and some leaders fell off, is that they were not as focused on the metrics and coming back to the business leaders with what the value add is. And so I think we need to be leading with that. So when I talk to our CEO, who is a 70-something-year-old cisgender white man, I'm not coming in and talking about the events that we're doing. I'm not talking about how people's sense of belonging is. I'm talking about retention. I'm talking about the number of requests around supplier diversity programs that we're getting from our prospective clients that are coming to the sales team. I'm talking about our representation compared to our competitors in this field. That is what I'm leading with. That other stuff is for the people who care about it, which is our employees. But when we're talking about clients, executive leadership, you have to talk their language, right? Because we can't assume that they know as much as we know or that they care, right? And so let's talk to them in the way that it's going to be most effective.
All right, enough said.
I said that was a masterclass right here.
All right, thank you.
All right. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to all four of you. This was literally the panel I've been waiting for all day today. And if this is all I hear, that's more than enough. And I'd like to know from all four of you, for the ones who can't speak on it, about any challenges that you find, that you experience when supporting your communities in a remote capacity. So what experiences or challenges do you have when supporting your remote communities?
I can start with that. So Hubspot is a majority remote company, and we do have headquarters in certain cities, but for the most part, we're all at home. We're all hanging out. And I think, especially as a person who was previously on the leadership team as well within our ERG, it is a hard thing to get accountability within the community, to get engagement within the community, to try and get most folks involved with any of the programming that you're doing, any of the discussions that you're having, to make sure that they're seeing the bigger picture of what you're working on. And so there has been a lot of shifts within our team, and we got a new DI&B program manager who's been doing an amazing job to be transparent in the work that is happening. I think before, again, we were in the midst of just coming in hot and having a lot of events and a busy calendar, and it got to the point that it was overwhelming for people. So trying to, yes, definitely fatigue, being able to figure out where to meet folks, where they're going to join. So taking the wins that sometimes certain events are going to be smaller, and sometimes you need to be more intentional in having those spaces. Creating processes for folks, because before it was just, okay, come be a part of this and have a good time. But now, how do we make it so that it is something that people take personal responsibility for? And I think that's the most important, because before, I was on the leadership council for 2 years. In my first year, it was just, all right, if you show up, you show up, and if you don't, you don't. And then the second year, we were getting packets, we were getting training, we were getting instruction, we were getting encouragement to run different events and host different things, and we took that personal responsibility to be able to get engaged. And so with that, you got your work homies, so you're gonna have them start to get involved, they're gonna start to speak up, and advocacy happens both internally and externally as well. So being able to start getting some of those people to speak up about coming to these events, to go in the chat afterwards and say, oh, that was a really dope event. Y'all missed out if you didn't come, so that people have that missing out feeling. But it's definitely hard to try and get folks excited when you can't see them face to face and you can't talk to them one-on-one. But those are some of the high-level areas that we've worked on a lot in the last year.
I think something else that I would add is ask people what they want. Right? Because I think we've been doing things a certain way since 2020 and just assuming that it works for everyone. And circumstances might have changed. Their interests, right? Fatigue, lots of things have changed. And so I think asking people again at this point, what do you want, right? If you're doing events after work, maybe that doesn't work for everybody anymore. And we need to start doing events at lunchtime or in the morning, right? If you're majority North American like our organization is, are you facilitating programming and conversations at times that work for you, but not for anyone else in the other parts of the world, right? So thinking about how can we be more inclusive and equitable in the actual execution of our programming. Another thing that I recently did was pull the data from Zoom, whatever platform you use, WebEx, Teams, et cetera, to look at the participation of all of our programming over the last year, and then look at it across function. So then I could go to the functional leaders and say, hey, did you know that sales had the most attendance at all of our DEI programs for this year? And you in this part, you all are not doing very well, right? Creating some accountability and competition internally, right? Not only on, to the executives, but also, I don't know, the Black community, they're really going hard, they show up. Their attendance is 80% of our community. I don't know, our LGBTQ plus community, you all aren't showing up. Is this still something that you all are interested in? So ask people what they want to see where you can adapt, and then wherever you could leverage data, again, I keep coming back to the money, the metrics here. Wherever you could leverage data to maybe create some accountability and spark competition and internal rewards and recognition, right, is also another helpful tip.
And I think lastly, meeting people where they are. I think that's important, right? If we have somebody that can participate 50% of the time, let's take it, right? And when they are there, be like, oh, wow, you're here. We appreciate you coming, and get them excited and engaged. But I think that's the most important thing, is to really meet people where they are, honestly.
Hi, my name is Nicole Anderson, and I am president of NAL Speakers Bureau. And I've definitely seen a shift in companies hiring DEI-B speakers coming into your companies. But my question is, since things are not as hot as they used to, how are your companies still using external speakers and thought leaders to keep the momentum going a little bit for DEI and really still keep the talking about culture, talking about change in your organizations? Love to hear about that. Thank you.
I don't know about other organizations, but TD, we're still using speakers. We just had speakers last week for AAPI, so we always have speakers. We're going to have a speaker for Juneteenth. We're still using speakers, so I don't know about other organizations, but for TD, we're still using speakers. So.
I think it goes down to that budget, right? Like the organizations who still have budget are still going to bring speakers in, right? It's going to be to the discretion of the ERGs to decide what they want to do with the funds. And so I think speakers, if not already connecting with ERG leaders, should be connecting with ERG leaders because they're the ones who decide how they use their money, right? With the oversight of leadership. The other way that we're still using speakers at Forrester is from a training and development perspective, right? And so that's an opportunity, rather than having someone just come in and talk about culture, right? Maybe have someone come in and talk about how to shift or change culture as a leader and then create a cohort. So that person or those people are coming in on a regular basis and spread across time as opposed to a singular one-time event, right? And so from a, strategic financial perspective, that's something that I'm thinking about, is how can I get the best bang for my buck and create more opportunities and more touch points.
Yeah, both internally and externally, we're still using speakers. And similar to what you were saying was the intentionality behind what we're using them for now. So before it could have just been for a panel or a webinar. Now we might bring them in for a workshop or for a directed focus on a book that they wrote and be able to do almost like a series as well. So it's almost like we're working smarter, not harder in terms of the work we do with them. I have externally, with the communities that we run for our customers and fans of Hubspot, we've been able to kind of take a multi-pronged approach where we may have had them for an event, but then we also invite them to a conference, and then we also provide like a book signing and then some sort of delight moment for maybe 10 people who engage in our community the most. And we do some of that similarly internally as well. We are able to plan specific topics that we're going to have. So say it's Black History Month, but this Black History Month, we are discussing Afrofuturism for the whole month. And we're bringing in topics and hosts that center that so that there is a whole focus and making sure that like we're not just going on all of these like random topics that we just pinned because it sounded interesting. We're making it really intentional and we're making it really focused. And so we'll go and find leaders in that way to speak. We have also started to do a lot more of asking the community for folks that they are excited about around those topics. Since I do a lot of partnerships, the DI&B team internally also will reach out and say like, who do you know? How, are they available? Like, have we worked with them before? And what are the ways that we've done that? And we are able to do that across the board to say like, hey, has anybody heard about this person? When was the last time you engaged? To see how excited our ERGs get about potential speakers. So it's really cool to be able to have that community aspect of bringing them in. But again, it does all fall down to budget. But there's so many people at different tiers that there is always someone, and anytime folks internally say that there's not, it's like, no, that's the time to ask our resource groups so that they can reach out. But also for anybody who runs an agency, being able to find the people internally that are booking that talent and sharing like themed topics that those folks can cover makes our jobs a lot easier.
Yeah, pitch packages and have diversity in the range, right? Because again, we are working in very budget-constrained times right now, and so folks are looking to figure out how they can, continue to do this work, but in a way that's cost-effective, but yet still impactful.
Well, thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause again. Thank you, panelists. All right. Well, everybody have a good afternoon. We'll be around for most of the day, so if you have any questions, you can come and find us.
Thank you.
Thank you.